Hi everybody, thanks for tuning in again. I hope that I am helpful to you with these podcasts, rudimentary as they may be, giving you some ideas about places that I've traveled and some things to do if you decide to go there as well. Today I'm speaking about Prague. Great city, fabulous, pretty good walking city around the old town, but you'll get in your 10,000 steps in a day. You'll see what I mean as I continue. So my wife Eleanor and I went there a few years back on the first leg of a romp from Prague all the way over to the Lake District of Italy. So we flew from Atlanta into Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris and then took another flight over to Prague, then a taxi to this brilliant boutique hotel called Podvizi. It is at the foot of the Karlov Most, the Charles Bridge over the Vltava River in Prague. Great central location. We wound up with a top floor that had been, I believe, a converted attic at one time, but it was really like a suite and gave us a brilliant view over the bridge with a gorgeous statues and great architecture all around in that area. I was most fortunate to get this hotel. I have to send a shout out that there was some help given to me by an employee at the U.S. Embassy that helped arrange for us to get this hotel. So there's a lesson in there. Utilize all options and avail yourself of what you can when you're traveling. Well, we checked in and straight away we headed off to the castle complex, and you walk uphill, and there's several stairs involved, again, getting in your 10,000 steps in a day. And we went up to see the Hrad, H-R-A-D, is castle in Czech, and this is the largest castle complex in the world. In this complex are also St. Vitus Cathedral, St. George's Basilica, some areas where the guards were housed called the Golden Lane, etc. Now, we only had part of a day to see it as we arrived a little bit late. The cathedral was closed for a concert, so we elected to go back later. But what we did avail ourselves of was look around the castle and go to the brilliant art exhibit at St. George's Basilica, where they had a Mannerist exhibit. Probably the most famous painting was The Stag Hunt by Roland Savary. I think you might look that up on the internet and check it out. But then we went over to the Sternberg Palace and saw all manner of classical art, Rubens, Rembrandt, Peter Bruegel, and then a great painting by El Greco, quite unusual. Jesus was praying and had a square halo. Can't think that I've ever seen a square or rectangular halo around any deity or saints previously. So subsequently we went back down the hill and decided to walk over the Karlov Most, the Charles Bridge, which was featured in the 1996 Mission Impossible initial film of the very successful Tom Cruise series. This had John Voight in it. I believe he jumped from that bridge along the way. So you might recognize it, and if you watch that movie, you'll get some great views of the statuary and the bridge itself. So crossing over the bridge, you can walk into the Stare Mesto Nemesti, which is the old town square. As I said, Prague lends itself to a walking tour. Along the way, you pass through several different areas selling several different souvenir shops selling items, etc. I bought this super cool soccer jersey from Pavel Nedved. See, it's got the crest for Czech Republic insignia there. Pavel Nedved, probably the world's most famous Czech soccer player, played for the national team, also played in Italy for the massive club Juventus. For those of you soccer fans tuning in, you can tell I'm one. Anyway, getting into the Stare Mesto, that's where there is the Piece de la Resistance, which is the astronomical clock of Prague, about 1/4 of the way up the Stare Mesto Radnice referring to the town hall. This clock is really kind of two clocks on top of each other, and they move in opposite directions. On the hour when it strikes, there's a procession of the 12 apostles. There are beautiful figurines around the clock. It dates from the 15th century. It is the oldest astronomical clock still functioning. Now, there's some other cool things to see in the square. Across the square is a monument to Jan Hus, who was a martyr of the Reformation. He was similar to the reformer Menno Simons. Some of those of you who live in the southern United States will recognize the colonies of the Mennonites, various communities of those who followed the teachings of Menno Simons, the Christian reformer, and they're throughout South Carolina and Georgia, perhaps some other states, famous for their bakeries. But they derive from a similar time period as those that followed Jan Hus, who were called the Hussites. Unfortunately, Jan Hus was martyred, as mentioned, burned at the stake. So also in the Old Town Square is the Church of Our Lady of Tyne. Has brilliant twin spires, gorgeous ancient church, and then you'll notice that all the buildings are old there, and they have frescoes on them, some depicting King Wenceslaus amongst others. The frescoes are called graffiti, so put the word graffiti out and then put an S in front of it, and that's how it's spelled. So great place to check out. We had dinner there and then headed on back as we were a bit tired from the transatlantic flight. We went to bed. I got up super early the next morning and went down to the Starry Mesto, crossing the Charles Bridge about 7 in the morning, and got into the Starry Mesto and set up in front of the Starry Mesto Red Niche to take photographs when the clock struck 8 that morning. There were hardly anybody around, and there's lots of crowds later in the day. But I went early in the morning to get a good photograph. I hope you'll check out my Instagram and Facebook for the photos. I think you'll like them. Anyway, doing that, I succeeded, and I even prevailed upon one of the lone tourists around to take my picture in front of the town hall. Went back to the hotel, had some breakfast with my wife Eleanor, and then took a nap. And then we checked out of the hotel, but prevailed upon them to leave our luggage there, and we went off to the castle complex to see that which we'd not picked up on the day before. Toured the Darabor Tower. That is really a dungeon, and it's named after the first person that was in prison there, Mr. Darabor. So also looked at the Golden Lane, looked at the palace, looked at the cathedral this time. It was open. I hope you'll enjoy the pictures that I have over on Instagram and Facebook. So walking back down the hill, we crossed the Carroll of Most and went to Kampa, Kampa Island. Not sure how you spell that. Not sure how you pronounce that. And I think I know how to spell it, but as Czech is not a first language for me, I'm struggling. Anyway, there we ate at a great little cafe. I want to read the name off so that I don't get it wrong, because I'm going to highly recommend it. It's called Malostransky Pivo Nice. So Pivo Nice refers to that it's kind of a cafe lined up around the idea of drinking beer and enjoying the sights. So the island has several walking trails, then you can look at the bridge and look out over the Vlatva. So pivo is the Czech word for beer. So this would be a good time to digress and talk about how famous beer is in the Czech Republic. So let me show you a couple things. This is a glass for Pilsner Urquell. Now, I'm going to try to get that where it can be seen, I hope. Well, let me hold it up close to the camera, pass it around a little bit. So Pilsner Urquell is a type of lager, a Pilsner, named after the Czech town Pilsen. So if any of you out in American viewer land have ever had a light beer by Miller, you'll notice that it proclaims itself a fine Pilsner. So Pilsner is a type of lager. Now, the Czechs are very proud of their beer, rightfully so. They've had a lot of beer innovation, and they make some great beer. They have a saying in Czech Republic, beer makes great bodies. Now, perhaps the best Czech beer, best in my opinion, and one of the best worldwide of the mass-produced beers, is the original Budweiser Budvar Budnish Budweiser. So if you'll see over here, it says greetings from the Republic of Beer, and then over here it has the logo for Budweiser, Budweiss. So you see how it's spelled like American Budweiser, called Budvar. It has nothing to do with American Budweiser and is much older. This is a Pilsner type beer brewed in Czech Republic, lager Pilsner style. Very refreshing, very delicious, has a good crisp taste to it. But the Czechs have tons of beers. Pilsner Urquell, as I mentioned. Staropramen is another very famous Czech beer. They're quite proud of them, justifiably so. Well, subsequent to eating at Campa Island, we decided that we would like to go see the Staré Město na Městě and go to the Old Town Square again, and we set up in a great little cafe. I want to give you the name of it, Kaverna, Kaverna, right across from the Staré Město Radnice, to look at the astronomical clock to watch it strike again. And sure enough, we were able to watch it strike 8 p.m. So about 12 hours after I'd gone there initially that day, watched it again. I could watch it many more times. It's very fascinating, and the workmanship, the detail is just astonishing when you consider that all this was done in the 15th century. Amazing the handicraft that these people put into this brilliant clock. So we did that and then shopped a bit and enjoyed our time in the cafe and tried out a couple of the local Czech beers. Subsequently, we went back to the hotel and were met by the taxi and headed off to the railway station. Now, I had prevailed upon the taxi driver to stop at what I consider the one site in Prague we just hadn't had time to get to yet, and that was the statue of King Wenceslas. And you might remember that name from the eponymous Christmas carol, Good King Wenceslas. So thus, we saw that statue, photographed it, and went on to the train station, boarded the train to head over to Budapest and carry on with the trip. So this was basically 36 hours in Prague, which we availed ourselves as best we could of location to be able to walk up to the castle, walk across the bridge, walk over to the Old Town Hall and the Old Town Square, see the sights, and along the way pick up a couple of souvenirs, learn a little bit about their cuisine and their beer culture. Cuisine. When I mentioned eating at Campa Island, we had roast duck, which was fabulous. So duck is a common choice of meal in that area, and it is prepared exquisitely. So I hope that you will visit Prague. I hope that you find this short travel log helpful. Thank you very much for tuning in. And if you would do me the courtesy of liking me on Instagram, Facebook, and perhaps subscribing to YouTube, I would be grateful. Have a good day. I'll see you on the next journey. Bye-bye.